Well, hello, welcome to the Sustainability Strategy Summit. I'm your host, Jessie Servio-Ortiz, and today I have the privilege of interviewing our Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, Madela Barnes. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. The pleasure is all mine.
Great. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation and hear what the state's perspective is on sustainability. So let's dive in. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what is the state's sort of perspective and what does sustainability mean to the state of Wisconsin and what are the current priorities for the state?
Yeah, so I'll just say that it's not a debate. This is a non-negotiable. We know that climate change is here. We know that climate change continues to impact communities all across Wisconsin, and it impacts communities differently depending on where you are. And it's important that our state takes meaningful action to make Wisconsin a much more sustainable place by working to minimize the impacts of climate change, the impacts that it has on our health, our property, our way of life, but also recognizing the opportunities that come along with tackling climate change. There's a real possibility, the potential that exists for Wisconsin to create good paying jobs in the renewable energy sector is something that I'm actually inspired by despite the challenges. I think that the ability that we have as a state to become leaders in sustainability is what's going to push us forward. And unfortunately, we were behind for a long time in the climate change fight. But the ironic part is that before we were behind, we were ahead. We ended up taking steps backwards. And now Governor Evers and we took action as soon as we got into office. We joined the U.S. Climate Alliance. We set new clean energy goals for Wisconsin. What's especially exciting for me is that we created the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. And this is the office that's going to lead the state's efforts in mitigating the impacts of climate change through programs and the policies that support the use of clean energy resources and new technology. And then the task force on climate change. And I had a chance to chair that task force, which was an exciting opportunity because it brought together so many people from across our state with one common goal in mind.
Awesome. So I know that you sort of led the task force on climate change, and now the state is in the process of creating a clean energy plan for the state. So how are those two things sort of tied together and how are they different?
Absolutely. So with the climate change task force, that is what we want to put together to make sure that we were able to bring together stakeholders to talk about different impacts, different challenges, but also different opportunities. And we wanted a very public process. So we got together about 32 members that were formal participants in the task force, but we also had public listening sessions. And this came through executive, or excuse me, I should say executive number 52 created that task force, but executive order number 38 created the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy to develop a comprehensive statewide clean energy plan. Now, the clean energy plan is very specific, it is very focused, but the task force on climate change, that made sure that we addressed a number of emerging issues in different industries. The recommendations that came out of the task force, I think there were a total of about 55 that spanned 9 different sectors. This included agriculture, it included transportation, it included jobs in the economy, the environment, obviously, food systems, resilience, and so many other issues. And with the task force, I mean, we had business community represented, small businesses, large businesses. We had the agriculture community represented, indigenous communities represented, and so many other people who had a role to play in addressing climate change. But recognizing the existing conditions here in the state and the need for us to move Wisconsin towards a clean energy economy, the Clean Energy Plan specifically seeks to have our state reach 100% carbon free. And that is the primary responsibility with the Clean Energy Plan as it relates to the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. Now, that office worked incredibly closely with the task force, and we expect for that engagement to continue.
Great. So, the task force made a report. I know that I, read part of that report. What what happens now? So, you made the recommendations to the state, sort of what's happening with those recommendations now?
So a number of those recommendations did make it into the state budget. Unfortunately, those provisions were written out of the budget. There were Republican members of the budget writing committee, the Joint Committee on Finance, that didn't see a need to prioritize these issues. Fortunately, we still will see some of these things come up through separate legislation, and there are also executive steps that we can take to address some of the recommendations that were in the task force report. But the important thing to recognize is that the task force created a roadmap for Wisconsin to become a leader. It provided a roadmap for us not to just catch up, but to set an example for other states across the country. And the thing about it is, we've gotten so much positive feedback because of the comprehensive nature of the task force report. And I've talked to people and all over the country, virtually over Zoom, about the steps that we took to get to that point. And hopefully, it can serve as an example to places that aren't Wisconsin at all. And besides, obviously, the impact that it can have here. But one exciting thing as well is that there are many opportunities for local government to get active or be able to get involved in this fight, because that's what was happening before we took office. We saw local government step up and meet the moment, meet the
Mhm.
challenges. And unfortunately, prior to our administration, there was a threat of preemption, but that threat doesn't exist right now because we are focused on sustainability efforts and helping out local government where we're able to.
hmm Yeah, so we have our base is primarily businesses. So we get a lot of sustainability professionals that really want to help influence change, both in their business and in their communities. And, often they feel disheartened when they hear a no. So, I'm just thinking right now, it's like these recommendations didn't make it. Not all of them made it in the budget yet, right? It's not that they're not going to happen. It's a not yet. It's not a no. And so I constantly like to remind them, like, just because you get a no now doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future. And so, do you see some of these recommendations potentially? I know you said some will be in the clean energy plan, but then, maybe next budget cycle, we could get a few more in.
Yeah, well, these things have to happen. And I want to remind the listeners, the viewers, that the governor's budget included many of these proposals. And I think that for the business community, especially, there's an opportunity to be involved and continue to press legislators who may be on the fence about this and asking them why. We know that addressing climate change is good for business. We know that our tourism industry is impacted by climate change. We know that our farming operations are impacted by climate change. This all has an impact on economies all across Wisconsin. And so if our economy is impacted by climate change, it only makes sense for us to address this issue, especially from a business perspective. So I would just make the ask, if you have relationships with legislators who don't see climate change as an issue, I hope that you'll begin to engage them in conversation and help us to change minds. Unfortunately, it feels like the bottom line for them is not wanting the Evers administration to get a win. It seems that, people would like to, prefer to be critical of the governor than actually delivering for people in this state. It's unfortunate that it's gotten so political because there is no partisanship when it comes to climate change. These historic and catastrophic weather events are impacting Democrats and Republicans. When we do our storm damage tours, if I'm walking down or if we're driving down the road, we see people walking, cleaning up remnants from their barns or from the farms. We don't say, hey, you're Democrat or Republican. We just ask if they need help because that's what we are here to do. And it's important that we sort of codify our efforts into law, whether it's through the budget, whether it's through separate legislation, or whether it is through executive action, to not just say we're here to help clean up the mess, but we want to help prevent this from ever happening again. We want to make sure that you don't have this awful experience, because you shouldn't. Now, these weather events, things are going to happen. But the fact is, the intensity of these storms continues to increase. And you see the Pacific Northwest historic heat waves. There's a historic drought right now and wildfire season in California. And southern Wisconsin was dealing with a drought earlier this month and in June. And we have to take the necessary steps to one, be able to stave off the impacts of climate change, but also create more resilient communities in the process.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I often try to frame it for people, right, as thinking more through the lens of human health also, right? Like pollution affects all of us. We all want clean water. Our businesses might depend on it or our bodies depend on it. So what are the ways that we can connect with people about these issues that affects them, whether they're a business or not, right? And especially businesses who care about a financial future, right? Like these are long-term issues that are going to affect their business, whether or not they're seeing it right now, right? Like in the agricultural supply chain, it's much easier to see that a drought might affect the tomatoes coming from California and you might have a supply problem. It's harder sometimes to see in some of the manufacturing communities or, maybe small service-based businesses that aren't directly affected. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations? And this is kind of broad question that like specific actions businesses could take, if they aren't really ready or willing to pick up the phone and call a legislator, even though I know that's important.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts on actions they can take?
Well, I think that most of the businesses I have a chance to talk to, the ones that are interested in more sustainability efforts, it comes down to the bottom line. There's energy efficiency programs offered through our Focus on Energy program. I think that it's important to reach out because there are resources available for businesses that are interested in more sustainable practices. More sustainable business operations. And we know that energy efficiency directly reduce costs for businesses. And it's one of the most cost-effective mitigation strategies. And we also know that there's reduced production costs and also enhanced product sales. People want to spend their dollars responsibly. And I think that addressing climate change, I think that promoting your own individual efforts makes you more competitive, makes you more attractive to consumers because there's the enhanced reputation with customers and with shareholders. And that's part of the reason too, while, Wisconsin was sort of dormant in the fight against climate, or I guess not dormant, well, was dormant, missing in action during the fight against climate change. We saw our utility companies set goals before the state officially set goals. I
Mhm.
think that this happened because customers were asking for it, shareholders are asking for it. When I talk to utility executives, that's exactly what they say. And it was sort of a weird place to be in where we were following the lead of utilities to make this happen when the state should have been a leader in the first place. And I think that there are some specific actions that in resources that are available from the state, that could help you advance these priorities, with 100 over 100 different electric and gas utilities. Like I mentioned before, the Focus on Energy program works with businesses, works with farms, works with school districts, local governments, and other property owners to install cost-effective energy efficiency and renewable energy products or projects. And since 2001, Focus on Energy has helped over 2.8 million residents and businesses save over $730 million in energy costs. This is close to $1 billion saved. And I think that we can push more and more. And this is the sort of project or program that has survived administrations in different parties. That's the beauty of Focus on Energy
Mhm.
in that program and its efficacy. And people across the country are familiar with our Focus on Energy program. It's award winning. And so
Mhm.
we have to keep advocating for more assistance programs just like that. And there were a number, like I mentioned, that were in the Climate Change Task Force report that would create and deploy workforce transition plans. Because a part of the conversation is always, well, what do we do with people employed in the fossil fuel industry? Well, the fact is, here in Wisconsin, we don't have a whole bunch of people employed in the fossil fuel industry. We get the bulk of our energy from coal, and the coal that we get is not found in Wisconsin. We have to get that shipped in from other states. And with that being said, that is money that is just leaving Wisconsin that could be more responsibly spent here. And we can also support more post-secondary educational programs that'll help grow the workforce. I know that the small business community has has long advocated for more support for technical education as well. And then, we are looking to create the WEDC Green Grant Loan Program to support Wisconsin businesses, or that program does exist, I should say, that focuses on zero waste, energy efficiency, green technology, and also green businesses.
Mm,
And yeah,
awesome. I would love to include those resources in the email that I send out to folks. So we'll connect on how I can find them. I know Focus on Energy, but some of the other ones maybe um,
absolutely.
connect on, make sure businesses have access to those. Um, so I know the clean energy plan is in process right now, and I just wanted to say that in September, Maria and I are coordinating on an event to get some businesses feedback on that plan. So I believe it's September 16th. I want to invite listeners that if you have feedback, that would be a wonderful time to come and hear. Do you just have any sort of initial thoughts on what are some of the primary recommendations or ways? I mean, that's kind of a big goal, right? To reach, what did you say the goal was? Carbon neutral or zero emissions? I
100%
forget exactly.
carbon free. I mean, like there are many ways to put
Yeah,
it, and honestly, it sort of changes, it evolves over time. Like those definitions change, those expectations change. But the fact is, we want a carbon free future.
right. And so at this point in this juncture, do you have any like big sense of how we're going to get there as a state?
Yeah, it is going to be diverse. There's going to be a mix. Like we don't have the solar opportunities that a California has. We don't have the wind opportunities that Iowa has. We have some of them, like in the driftless region, but it is going to be a little bit more difficult. Like Iowa, like the amount of energy they get from wind, that should serve as an inspiration to us, because this is a state with a Republican governor, with a Republican legislature. And at the Lieutenant Governors Association meetings, I typically sit next to the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Iowa. We're close to the same age. So it's not really an organization of a mid 30-year-old. So we talk, we hang out. I consider him to be a friend, even though we disagree on a whole lot. And I'm like, dude, you got to get up here to Wisconsin. You got to tell your party about what wind energy has done for your state and how we are truly missing out on opportunities here in Wisconsin. So still working on making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that, there are opportunities with wind. There are already opportunities with solar. There are a number of opportunities that exist that were outlined in the report, like making it easier for people to be able to have more energy efficient or sustainable projects in their home, like on bill financing, to help those to help customers, individual customers, be able to finance solar projects right on their utility bills, which makes
Mm-hmm.
that process easier for people who can't pay for it all up front. And it only makes sense, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not a big fan of the piecemeal approach, but I think that's sort of where we are. Wisconsin is a unique place. Wisconsin is geographically, topographically, or otherwise diverse, and we just have to. I'll think about the way the country is, how there are different strategies depending on which region, but here in Wisconsin is like a microcosm of that, because there are different opportunities just depending on where you are.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, a big part of this interview series is really to help sustainability professionals sort of break through their own barriers and learn to be better influencers of sustainable change. I know you have a particular personal interest around sort of the environmental justice side of the equation. And I'm curious any advice you have or just thoughts for the sustainability professionals out there, how we can be better culturally sensitive change agents inside of businesses.
Absolutely. I think it starts with listening. And I can just point to the task force, because we were very deliberate about recruiting a diverse coalition of people that represented different perspectives, like even people who typically don't sit in the same room or want to sit in the same room or have been at odds with each other. But the way that we find solutions is to involve everybody who has a stake in the process. And like I said, that included environmental advocacy organizations, and that also included utility companies, because the reality, utility companies are going to deliver energy to overwhelming majority of people in this state and across the country. And it didn't make sense for organizations or individuals to continue to talk around each other or talk over each other. It made sense for people to come to the table together to have conversations with one another so that we could come up with the best solutions. And this also included organized labor being a part of the conversation. And everybody had a shared vision to make Wisconsin cleaner, safer, more equitable for whatever reason, right? Like I had a conversation with one of my friends who's on the task force. So we had a bipartisan coalition of legislators, and one of the Republicans who's on the task force. I used to serve with him in the assembly, and we had a very honest dialogue. He's like, "Look, this is the one that I could see, or this is another thing that I could actually see us getting behind, simply from a cost saving perspective." Now, obviously, I think there are many more reasons and many more things we could be doing. But if we can get people on board with a couple things, I think we start there and we get the ball rolling. It makes no sense just to stall ourselves, waiting on the silver bullet.
Mhm.
And to make this a Wisconsin analogy, somebody did say there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but there is silver buckshot. So there are lots of things that we can and should be doing. Taking this approach, just sort of throwing everything at the wall, and a little more strategic than throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, because we are looking in a certain direction. We have things that we want to see happen, but we want to. My advice, I guess I would say to sustainability professionals, is making sure that people who haven't always been a part of the conversation do have a chance to find space and
Mhm.
include perspectives that may not be yours, because so often we can get in our own bubbles, and like you mentioned, and we only see things one way, ignoring the reality that exists for so many people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is your task force example is really great. And I think of that for businesses and sustainability professionals to not forget about the different departments, right? So there's different types of stakeholders, both internal and external, and just hearing from them, listening to different departments, ideas or views really helps not only get buy-in, but understand their needs. And when you understand their needs, you can create a solution for the company, for the employees that then works, right? Because
Yeah.
people are bought into it, they understand it, you take the time, and yeah, that takes more time sometimes, but it's a more effective way of moving things forward. I think, again, to your point, like progress happens at this juncture when we're able to sort of collaborate and be willing to hear different ideas and different points of view. And through that process, then we can come to solutions and ideas that then we can all get behind. So I think that's great. And I'm going to wrap up kind of with a final question that you sort of touched on throughout this interview, really just kind of talking about what is the vision for Wisconsin and really where are we headed? If you could paint the stroke of what you see for the future in say 10 years, where would Wisconsin be?
Yeah, so my thing about that is, looking at the realities, across the country, on the coast, and if we don't do something about this, uh, there are going to be a whole lot of people, obviously, who want to seek out the Midwest as sort of a climate haven, as places start on the dangerous path of becoming uninhabitable. But the fact is, we can and we have to make Wisconsin a place where everybody can grow up in a safe and clean space, and also have the opportunity to thrive regardless of zip code. And Wisconsin must also be a leader. We've done big things before. We've always stepped up to the plate. We've always answered the call and met the moment. And this is a moment unlike those others. And we have to be able to center climate change and how we look at health outcomes, economic opportunity, and all other issues of justice. This is our edict. we have to do this, and this is for the future. This is, we can't just say, oh, well, the youth are going to come in and save us, because it's not their responsibility. It is our responsibility. We're here. We have to do something about it, and we have to take the direction as well from people who have led this fight for a very long time. We also have to take the direction from the people who have been immediately impacted. And that's where we find our solutions. And I know that Wisconsin can get this done. I'm incredibly inspired, incredibly proud of the leadership of the people that I run into on an almost daily basis, who are so committed to making Wisconsin the best place to live on earth.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, I'll just end by saying, this idea of progress again, I hear a lot from businesses that see themselves as separate from government, right? That's not their responsibility. And I think, again, this idea of collaboration, where this just really has led the way for the last decade on the sustainability conversation. And now government gets to catch up, and how we go faster further is really by working together to meet that vision. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, thank you.